purpose of this project is to really look at development in the far north. And when you think about development, you have pictures that run through your mind about maybe mining or infrastructure development, hydro transmission lines. And this is what Ontario policy under the Far North Act has defined development as, or they describe development as that. But what is it that a community in the far north, and especially a First Nation community, thinks development is? So we're taking the approach that human development is, or that development is about human development, and it's looking at the opportunities and freedoms that the people of North Spirit Lake, which is the community that I'm working in, what are those opportunities and freedoms that they need to live a life that they value? And when you think about the relationship that we have to the land, it's difficult to describe. First of all, when we think about land, there's two different ways to look at it. One, when we're looking at a land use planning way, we're looking at geography, or we're looking at parcels of land, and here's what its purpose is. Where the North Spirit Lake and the First Nation perspective, it's more holistic about that, and it's about the relationships that you have between a number of things. This is the concept of land. It's more of a web of relationships than it is about divvying up the land into categories. And so that's kind of what they're telling us, is that they need to keep that relationship to the land. The other part that's very difficult about this is that there's such a long history of policies that the people have lived under, been forced into. And so sometimes it's easy to default back to those Ontario policies or Canada's policies, instead of trying to force your own policies and your own vision into it. And so it's a constant struggle that's going on. So when you think about what are your well-being needs, it's not an easy question to answer, because most people are very confused about that. It's difficult for you or I to ask that, but when you're in a population that's been under specific rules and oppression, it makes it even more difficult to answer that question. I was glad to hear one of the things that seems to be consistent about it is when the people get out on the land, away from the reserve, and are out on the land, that they have this sense of freedom, that all of a sudden it's back to home. And so home is a different perspective from what we have. Home is larger, it's more complex, but it's such a good feeling to be living in that complexity and knowing that those relationships are there. And I think the other thing that was surprising, again, I don't know whether it was surprising, but it was the feeling that I got from being with the people, and that I actually started to love this place as well, and love the people that were there. And we certainly had a good relationship that was built throughout this project. Yeah, so the way this is working, the research wasn't set out with a clear objective. The research was actually to be directed by the people of North Spirit Lake. And so I followed along with their leads as to which way we should go. And this is one of the outcomes that we're trying to actually get, is what is the path that North Spirit Lakes wants in terms of making policy decisions. How can we deal with development? How can North Spirit Lake have an effective voice in policy development when it comes to any kind of Ontario development that's going to happen in that area? So, instead of Ontario coming in and saying, "Oh, we're going to put in all-season roads, and this is how it should go," they need to have that effective voice. They need to be able to say, "Well, we don't need a road here, or we want one here," to have a little bit more I guess, accommodation in the consultation process as well.